Mahatia City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
So today we're very fortunate to have with us Terry Burbidge, who's going to be talking about running a marathon in Mount Everest. Can you imagine? Right? I can't even get out of bed, let alone go up to Mount Everest. So we hope you enjoy it. Terry, come on up.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name's Terry. I'm going to talk about an event I did 38 years ago in 1987. I was a young man of 31 now then. Before I talk about the race, I'll just give you a little bit of background as to where I was in my life and how I managed to get involved in this sort of crazy event. I started running in my early 20s for a local running club, did 5-mile races, 10Ks. On the track I did steeplechase, maybe 1,500 metres. And then I started moving up distances, did 10 miles, half marathons, found I was better at those longer distances, so stepped up again, a few marathons, then some ultra marathons. I did the London to Brighton race a few times. And in '86, the year before this race, I was asked if I was interested in doing a thing called the Three Peaks Yacht Race. The three peaks were Snowdon, the highest mountain in Wales, Scafell Pike, the highest mountain in England, and Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in Scotland. And you travelled between them on a yacht. So the way that race worked, you started at Barmouth in Wales, the yacht sailed to Carnarvon, the two runners got off the boat, had to run to the top of Mount Snowdon, back down to the boat. That was about a 24-mile run, so almost a marathon with a mountain in the middle. Then we sailed up to Ravenglass in Cumbria, and we had to get off the boat and run to the top of Scafell Pike and back. That was a 33-mile run. Then it was on the boat again, up the west coast to Fort William, where we got off the boat and ran to the top of Ben Nevis and back. So that sort of got me into mountain running. Shortly after that race, I heard about this Mount Everest Marathon. Wow, that makes Ben Nevis look like a little sandcastle. I'm interested in this. So that was how I got involved in it. This race was in 1987. The picture on the slide is the front cover of a book that was published in 1988 about the race. And the guy on that picture is Stuart Duffield, who actually won the very first ever Mount Everest Marathon. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a talk about how the event went. Okay, so it got in the Guinness Book of Records as being the highest marathon in the world. Nobody had ever run a marathon that high before. And it started just below Everest Base Camp. So it wasn't like the London Marathon where you pitch up in your running kit and off you go. It took us about 2.5 weeks to get ourselves up to the start line. And we ran, basically it was mainly downhill, finished at Namche Bazaar, which is the Sherpa capital. So it was primarily downhill, but there were uphill sections in the race. It wasn't all down, there was lots of ups, and I've got an altitude profile I can show you. Okay, so the race started at 7:04 a.m. on November the 27th. I think it probably should have been 7 o'clock. We probably didn't get out of our tents early enough. And the race started just below base camp, near a village called Gorak, and we finished down in Namche Bazaar in the Sherpa capital. So it was also, as well as being the highest marathon in the world, it also involved the most downhill running. So there was lots of downhill stretches, but there were also some uphills. Okay, so the total descent was over 2,000 meters. The competitors had to trek out to the start lines 2.5 weeks to get to the start line, and we had to trek out slowly to try and acclimatise to the altitude, because where we were starting at 17,000 feet, you've only got about 50% of the level of oxygen that you've got at sea level. So that was a concern about actually acclimatizing ourselves to doing this event at that sort of altitude. Okay, so that's the altitude profile of the race. Okay, so you can see we started there just above Go at Shep, about 5,000 meters, and we finished down here at Namche. So mainly downhill, but there were some little ups. This up here was quite evil. Over a distance of 1,500 meters, we had to climb over 200 meters. So that's about 1 in 7. I think some cars struggled on 1 in 7. On some of the road races I've done, if you've got a 1 in 10 hill, you was well not happy with the organisers. And this was like 1 in 7 and rocks and boulders. So although it was a net downhill race, there was an awful lot of difficult uphill sections as well. Okay, so why was it held? Why did the organisers think this was a good idea? Well, they wanted to have a spectacular athletic event, and also to raise money for charities in Nepal. All the runners were encouraged to try and get sponsorship from friends, family, local business, etc., to raise money. We were allowed to include local UK charities as well, our local charities, but most of the money we were trying to raise was directed to the Nepalese. And it was also to bring sort of awareness of the area, the Sagarmatha region. Sagarmatha is the Nepalese name for Everest. It translates to sky goddess. That's a pretty good name for a mountain. Okay, so it provided a unique opportunity for research. We had a team of medics with us, a team of physios that were looking at how we coped with running at this sort of altitude, on our breathing, our health, and also on our joints. So there was quite a lot of research going on the race. Why would runners do this? It's usually climbers that go to Everest, but this was a chance to take part in a world first. There's not many of those about now, is there? The days of Christopher Columbus and Captain Cook, James Cook, discovering new worlds, that's all fallen now. So there's not so much opportunity to do that now. And so this was seen as an opportunity to do something that's not been done before. Yeah, there's been lots of marathons, but not starting at 17,000 feet with less oxygen in the air. Okay, so runners are always looking for challenges, guts and glory. Somebody says you can't do something, we're damn well going to have a good try at doing it. And following dreams. That third point there is actually in the book that I showed you the picture of. Christians go to heaven, Muslims go to Mecca, climbers go to Everest, and now runners do too. So it was a new challenge for runners, something that perhaps hadn't been done before. So how did I get involved? Why did I personally want to take part? I used to take all the regular magazines, Athletics Weekly, Running Magazine, Runner's World, and in my monthly running magazine there was a stage spread advertising the race, looking for lunatics that were interested in having a go at this race. And there was contact details, so I sort of thought, this is interesting, especially as I'd done that Three Peaks one before. This was sort of similar but a bit higher. It was the lure of the unknown. Trying out, how can I cope with the cold and the altitude? How far, could I push myself? Pushing the boundaries. I knew a little bit about how far I could push myself from a race I did a couple of years earlier. I'd learnt there where sometimes your body will say to your brain, nope, I'm not doing this. What happened was I was doing a fairly low-key half marathon, local to where I lived. Wanted to do it because it was local. It was a very hot day. I'd come back from holiday in Spain with a bit of the Spanish tummy, so I'm probably a bit dehydrated. So probably not a great idea to run a half marathon when you're a bit dehydrated and you've got an upset stomach. But I was undeterred, so I swallowed quite a few slugs of Caline and morphine, settled the stomach, and did the race. Well, actually, I did part of the race. I don't remember much after 7 or 8 miles. Apparently, at 10 miles, I went into rubber leg mode, collapsed on the heap, on the floor, bundled into a car, taken down to see the medics at the finish. They were concerned enough to call an ambulance. I finished up being blue lighted to the hospital. I actually, in the ambulance, had one of these, I've never heard about it before, one of these out-of-body experiences. I actually felt myself looking down on my own body. And my body was sort of saying to my brain, you've got us in a fine mess now, haven't you? So, get to the hospital, obviously they sorted me out. I came to in resus, pools of sweat. Apparently I'd gone into hyperventilation, my heart was racing far too fast. And they also thought I'd had a heart attack. When they did blood tests, my blood was filled with cardiac enzymes, which apparently is what your heart emits when it's under stress. This was like nearly 40 years ago. There wasn't so much known about the effects of running on your heart. And we now know that, you know, any sort of stress in your heart, not just a heart attack, can cause these enzymes. So they thought I'd had a heart attack, but fortunately I hadn't. But they wanted to keep me in, obviously, for tests and stuff. I protested. I said, I'm doing a 100-kilometre road race in France the weekend. The nurse looked at me and said, we do have straitjackets. So they kept me in a lot longer than I wanted to, but eventually I was discharged. But I had to go to Bart's Hospital in London. It's the heart specialist. And luckily for me, the doctor I saw there was a guy called Dan Tunstall-Pedo, who happened to be the medical director of the newly formed London Marathon, and also the medical director for the London to Brighton road race I'd done a few times. So I knew of Dan, Dan knew of me. I walked in and he said, oh, another bloody runner. Get on the machine. So he put me on the machine and checked me out, and I was fine. Okay, so they let me out, and I filled in an application form, got accepted into the race. We had to fill out sign a few documents. For instance, they told us that they had no insurance to repatriate bodies if we did not make it. There was even a tick box, would you prefer to be cremated or buried on the mountain? I wrote, don't fancy either. Nobody ever got back to me. So I filled in their form, and that was it. I was going to be doing the race, preparing for it. There were dire predictions. In the month before the race, there was really heavy snowfall in the upper regions where we were going to be starting our race. The organisers were all out there in Nepal checking it out. They said it's okay. The Himalayan Rescue Association were not impressed at all. They strongly advised us against having the race, but we went ahead. The terrain was difficult. We knew that, you know, it was a mountain race, not a road race. Probably one of the big problems was that they worried about was altitude sickness. We were told that you know, people go trekking at that altitude and still get altitude sickness, and you lunatics are going to run around. There's not much oxygen in the air. So there was great concerns about the effects of the altitude. The organisers also wanted to try and get advertising for the race, try and build up the sponsorship, and they approached the Daily Telegraph. They actually sponsored the Three Peaks yacht race. So I thought, well, they're up for crazy events, they should be interested. They weren't really. They eventually ran an article about marathon madness. That is the actual article, a photocopy of it. It was very scathing. I think off the record, the reporter wanted to come along and report on the deaths as they happened. They were told about, you know, there was going to be aid stations every 3 miles, where there would be oxygen, etc., etc., and they suggested maybe we should have coffins there as well. So, and this was the day before the race. Flew out on a Sunday, this came out on Saturday. So that went down really well with friends and family at home, who really didn't want me to go. Okay, so we arrived in Kathmandu, flew out from Heathrow, and we had a couple of days in a nice hotel. The Nepalese were very welcoming. They thought this was a great idea, more so than, you know, the British press. We got a VIP welcome at the hotel. it was a good chance to get to know the other runners, because we didn't really know each other. In the party we had 50 runners, about 10 medics, another few people coming along as helpers, etc. So it was quite a big party. So we all got to know each other, and you found out who you was going to share in a tent with, because on the trek we were in 2-man tents. So you get to know who you paired up with. And our final planning, what kit we're going to leave behind in the hotel, what kit are we going to take with us on the trek. Okay, needless to say, we got in some running. This was a bunch of runners going out there. We used to go in running every day. And the Nepalese were great. They organised a 10-kilometre road race. So we all took part in that with a lot of the locals. That was all good fun. And then they split us into 2 groups. We were too big a party to actually all trek in together in one go. So they split us into 2, early birds and late birds, 24 hours apart. I was in the late bird, so the advantage of that was we got an extra night in Kathmandu, so extra few beers before we got off on the trek. Okay, that's just a picture I got off the net from Kathmandu. A lot of my personal pictures are back in the UK, because back in '87 you didn't have digital photography. I've got a few photos sent over from my long-suffering lodger, but this was just one picture of Kathmandu I sort of picked up off the net. After a couple of days in Kathmandu, we had to take a bus to a town called Jiri. Jiri is basically the last village before you have to start walking. And Jiri's at about 6,000 feet, and the idea was we get the bus out to Jiri, and then we actually start trekking out to the mountain. If you went on a trekking holiday to Everest now, you almost certainly wouldn't go to Jiri. You'd fly into a place a lot higher called Lukla, about 10,000 feet, but they felt that as we were going to be doing all this running, we needed to have as long as possible to acclimatise. So we were going to take the bus into Jiri and do the longer walk in. And that's the sort of bus we were on. They weren't very comfortable, very crowded, not equipped with toilets, etc. And just to make it a bit more difficult, this bad weather, there was a landslide. Completely blocked the road between Kathmandu and Jiri. So the solution was they sent a bus out from Jiri to the other side of the landslide, all our kit off the bus, hump it over all the rocks and boulders and stuff, onto the next bus, and off we go, second part of the journey. And of course, us runners, we wanted to get in a run. We like to get our training in. So we said to a few of us that got together, we knew each other quite well from Kathmandu, we said, we want to go for a run. They said, where the bloody hell are you going to run? We said, Jiri. It's a single road, we can't get lost. So when they stopped at a tea shop, for the comfort breaks, a few of us, 5 of us had got on really well in Kathmandu, so we got off and we headed off down the road for a run and said, pick us up when you come past, please don't run us over. So we got in our run that day. Okay, so we had a night in Jiri, and this was now the start of the part of the trek out to Namche. So here we were just trekking out to the finish line. Okay, this was going to take 4 or 5 days. Started in hill, green country, and slowly we're gaining altitude. You started noticing the lack of oxygen, started seeing the different scenery, and eventually we'd get up to Namche, the Sherpa capital, where the race was going to finish. Okay, so we were in 2 groups, early birds, late birds, 24 hours apart. And some of us late bird runners, again, we want to get in a run. We'd had the 10K in Kathmandu, we'd managed to get our little run on the road out to Jiri. But, we didn't want to walk all the time, we wanted to get in some running. So over dinner one night, we came up with a very cunning plan. Okay. What we did, this is us, we're the late birds, so we're overnight here. The early birds are here overnight, a day in front of us. They were about 8 or 9 miles away from us. We weren't trekking an awful long distance each day because it was quite difficult terrain. So our little plan was that, okay, by lunchtime tomorrow, these guys are going to be about 13 miles away from where we are now. 13 miles, half marathon, but hey, we can do a half marathon. So we waited till breakfast next day, spoke to one of the organisers we thought most likely to say yes. Is it okay if we do this? We're going to go and catch up with the early birds, have lunch with them, and then trot back to the overnight camp. And this was agreed, yeah, you can do that. So that was great, and we actually made it. We got to their lunch stop about when they was having lunch, had lunch with them. They were incredibly shocked to see us. To use a Thai phrase, they were "Juk Jai Mak Mak." They were surprised to see us. What are you doing here? But it was great. We got up there, and then we trekked back to our camp in the evening. As we got back into camp, we bumped into some of the medics. Ooh, they were not happy. Very happy with us. We got hauled into their tent, and they said, "Okay, guys, the strategy is we gain altitude slowly, and we don't overexert ourselves. Please, can one of you 5 explain how running an uphill half marathon before lunch fits with that strategy?" We struggled to answer that question. But anyway, so we got a bit told off by the medics, don't do that again. But we still got supper. They didn't send us to bed without our supper. I think I'm actually in this picture somewhere. Yeah, that's me there. This is Fiona, one of the medics. She's smiling now, giving us a bit of a ticking off earlier. So this was where we would eat of an evening. It got very, very cold overnight. So this is where we ate, socialised. We played cards, played tiddlywinks, just stuff to keep us occupied for the evening. Okay, this is in the morning, getting ready to move off next part of the trek. That guy there, that's Mike. He was the guy I shared my tent with. Me and Mike found out we only lived about 20 miles apart in the UK, so we kept in touch for a long while after the race. We used to go for beers and stuff. Then Mike decided to go travelling. I got the odd postcard from him, but I haven't heard from Mike for a long while now. I hope he's okay. This guy here, it's all his fault. That's Rob Howard, who wrote the article that sucked me in. And that's Joan, his video assistant. This guy, one of the Sherpas, they did all the heavy lifting, carrying the kit. We carried just day sacks for our personal stuff during the day, and all the tents and the heavy stuff was carried by these Sherpas. Absolutely wonderful people. And what was really good as well, when we got to our overnight camp, they usually knew where you could get the beer. They usually knew where there was a tea shop that also sold beer, so they were very good to sort of keep in with. Okay, there's a sort of a group photo outside one of the villages. I'm on the very right-hand side, sort of light-coloured shirt, longer hair than I've got now, looking a bit younger. That's just one of the places we would stop en route on our trek. Okay, that is Namche. So we eventually get to Namche. As you can see now, there's getting to some quite spectacular scenery. That's the Sherpa capital. And this is where the race was going to finish. So at this point, we've got ourselves to the finish line. Now there's a couple of the Sherpas. See their tea urns. It got very cold overnight. When they thrust that mug of hot tea through the tent flap in the morning, that was most welcome. In the background is a lodge. These lodges you could actually stay in. They did say to us, we've got our tents, but if you want to have a night in a lodge, you can, but it's at your expense. So a few of us went over to one of the lodges and inquired about staying there for a night. I can't remember exactly what the fees were, but to give you an idea of the structure, the guy sort of said, oh yeah, for a bed, it's only like a dorm with bunks, 500 rupees. And he said, oh, but if you use our restaurant, we only charge 300 rupees for the room. So we said, well, we've got all our food down camp, so we don't really need that. So we ordered a cup of lemon tea and we were having a chat. And then we said, yeah, we'll go for it. We'll stay in here tonight. So he goes up to pay, and he asks us for 330 rupees. We thought you said it was 500. He said, no, you've used the restaurant. So 300 plus 30 for your tea. So drinking a cup of lemon tea constituted using the restaurant. So we quite like that pricing structure. Okay, there's a bit of a map of the region. That's where we are in Namche. And from there we were going to start trekking up over the race route, which was up through Tengboshi, Pingboshi up here, and then off the map, but I've got another map here a bit wider scale. Okay, so there's Namche, there's Everest Base Camp, there's Shep, and this is where we were heading. This is where the race was going to start, up there. So we were now going to be starting on like the second part of our trek. We stayed in Namche a couple of days. We're up at about 11,000 feet now, so it was a chance to spend a couple of days acclimatizing. Okay, so we had a bit of acclimatization in Namche. Tengboshi Monastery was a wonderful place. We trekked past that. That was going to be on the race route. The monks gave us a blessing on the way up through the glacier region, and eventually we get up to Shep, which is the starting point for the race. So this is about 2.5 weeks since we left the UK, just to get ourselves up to the start line. These wonderful creatures on the second part of the trek did a lot of the heavy lifting. At this altitude, even the Sherpas couldn't carry so much kit, so we used these yaks to transport a lot of our kit, and as you can see, the scenery is now looking quite spectacular. Rope bridges. This was part of the race route. We were warned, it's not like the London Marathon, we can't clear the route. When you're racing back down, if there are yaks walking across that bridge, they ain't going to stop for you. And we was warned, do not upset the yaks. If you try rushing past them, pushing past them, they will go, and it's a very long way down without a parachute. So it was quite spectacular. Okay, there's a close-up of the rope bridge. You can see it's actually quite sturdy. Okay, so there it perhaps looks a bit hairy, but you know, it was quite sturdy, high sides. But so we were warned, you know, if there's yaks coming the other way when you're racing back down, be careful, don't upset them. Okay, that's that mountain in the top right hand side. There's Amadabla, and I think that's one of the most beautiful mountains I've seen. Unfortunately, that picture, it's got a bit obscured by those branches, but that's Amadabla and Tengboshi Monastery. Okay, so we got to Shep. This is where we're going to camp for a couple of days, acclimatise a bit more, because now we're up at 17,000 feet, so that we can actually, you know, start the race in a couple of days' time. It was pleasant during the day, about 20 centigrade. Bitingly cold at night, could go down to -20. And when the sun dropped behind the mountains, you could feel one half of your body getting cold. If you laid out on a blanket, perhaps, you know, doing a bit of sunbathing, which you could do during the day, one half of you is nice and warm, and you're starting to get frostbite on the other half. So you had to get your warm clothes on before you got cold. If you left it till after you started getting cold, you weren't going to get warm. Okay, some spectacular scenes up there, some of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Okay, so we had a pre-race day trip. You know, we was on holiday. You have day trips on holiday, don't you? We had a choice of two, Base Camp or Kalapatar. I opted for Kalapatar because I was told that was a peak adjacent to Everest where you can get absolutely brilliant views of the summit of Everest, whereas Base Camp, it's just, you know, loads of tents and people camping there ready to go up the mountain. So I opted for the Kalapatar option. Stuart, the eventual race winner, did a backflip on the top of Kalapatar, about 5,500 meters up. That was also in the Guinness Book of Records. I think it's not anymore. I think some other lunatic has done a backflip on a higher peak than Kalapatar. And Gus, one of our Scots, took his bagpipes up to the top of Kalapatar and played Amazing Grace on his bagpipes. I mean, that is a wind instrument, and there's not much oxygen, so fair play to Gus. There's a picture of Gus, bit red in the face, played his bagpipes on the top of Kalapatar. And over there, that is Everest. You can almost see the snow wisping off the top. Absolutely amazing. I've got a lot of pictures of this back home, so this isn't my picture, this is when I got off the net. So absolutely spectacular scenery. So we finally got there, race day, November the 27th, 1987. Overnight, the temperature dropped to -20. It warmed up a bit to -12 by the time we started the race in the morning. If you want to go for a pee in the night, that was not good. We was on a drug called Diamox, sort of an anti-altitude sickness drug. It was a diuretic. You had to take it twice a day, preferably breakfast and lunch. One day, I left it a bit late for my second dose, and we're all tucked down in the sleeping bag in the tent. Oh no, I've got to go outside. And my mate who I was sharing with was, "You're not opening that tent flap." I said, sorry, I've got to go. And brings a new meaning to the word peeing icicles. It was a tad cold. And that is the start of the race. As you can see, the terrain was a bit rocky and snowy. It shouldn't have been that bad. It was because they'd had all this bad weather before we went out there. This is why the Himalayan Rescue Association strongly advised that we didn't do this crazy race, but we're doing it. So that is Kevin, British Army guy, early leader. Kevin was a great guy. The Nepalese nicknamed him Angboxer. Angboxer is Nepalese for wolfman. Gives you an idea what Kevin was like. That's Stuart, who eventually won the race. There's Sam, and there's me. Doesn't really look like me because I'm hidden under all my clothing. Underneath all this heavy clothing, we did have a running kit on. It's just that because it was minus 12 here, we had to have loads of layers, and there was aid stations about every 3 miles on the way down where you could shed layers and grab a drink or whatever. You know, and they did have oxygen there just in case. They didn't have coffins. We didn't bother doing what the telegraph said. There's a couple more pictures of the runners lower down the course. As you can see now, down into running kit. And there is Stuart crossing the finishing line. Look at the smile on his face. Etched in history, the winner of the first ever Mount Everest Marathon. That was quite a shock that a Brit won the race. When we was trekking up and the medics were getting a bit fed up with us trying to go off doing half marathons all over the place, they said to us, "You guys are not going to win this race. When you get to Namche, you're going to meet the Gurkhas, the Sherpas. One of them is going to win the race. They are used to this altitude." So we was chuffed when Stuart won it. It was close. He won by about 30 seconds. And the second guy's out of picture, but Stuart won by about 30 seconds. A bit of race data. The winning time, Stuart's time is 4 hours 53 minutes. Stuart had won a road marathon in 2:25. So he was a decent runner, and that's how much this terrain slowed him down. Only 9 runners finished under 6 hours, and there were quite a lot of sub 2:30 marathon runners, road marathon runners in the race. 42 finished. Okay, I said earlier that we had 50 of us go out there. Only 45 started the race. 5 people did start getting symptoms of altitude sickness and had to be sent down the mountain. That's why we had the medics with us. They did tests on us every day. If we were showing signs of altitude sickness, you're going down. That's the only real cure for altitude sickness. Get yourself down to where there's more oxygen. So out of 45, 42 finished the whole race. That's a pretty impressive, I think, finishing rate. The 3 that didn't finish came out at about 32 kilometres or 20 miles. All 3 of them, it was where they'd gone over and done a bit of mischief to ankles. At the 32k point, you were actually quite close to Namche, and then you went round on a loop for the last 10k. So that was a good place where helpers could actually get them back down into Namche, although they sadly couldn't finish the race. Okay, there was lots of studies done. They tested the altitude sickness drug Diamox on us, which they did cause a problem if you took it a bit late in the day. There was a study, a biomechanical study done by these 3 guys from New Zealand. They did a lot of research on videoing us and looking at our running gaits and stuff. They were also the Tiddlywinks champions. In the tent of the evening, the New Zealanders were the Tiddlywinks champions. A bit more race data. I mean, as I said earlier, it was run on mountain trails. We had to contend with the normal traffic of yak trains, no closing of roads like you get in, say, the London or New York Marathon. And contrary to many opinions expressed, no serious injuries were sustained. Okay, 3 had awkward ankle injuries, but not broken ankles, just they weren't capable of finishing the race. So, contrary to all the opinions expressed, we were delighted that we got down this race without any casualties, because there were dire predictions before. A lot of people really wanted us to pull this race off. That's very blurred. That's the race results. That's out of the book. That's a copy from my copy of the book at home. I got my lodger to take a picture, but it is a bit blurred. But you probably can't read it, but Stuart won, and it was a Nepalese guy came second. He was only about 30 seconds behind Stuart. I'm down here somewhere. There's me in 18th. Finished 12 seconds behind Maggie, the First Lady. No disgrace to finish behind Maggie. So, I mean, a lot of us were, quite fast road marathon runners, but very few got under 6 hours on this race because of the terrain. Okay, there's other people that helped out. There's all the doctors. Again, sorry, it's a bit blurred, that slide. Doctors, the physios, all the marshals and helpers. So 50 runners went out, but there was almost another 50 of helpers. There's the backup team. These are the guys that organised it. It was their idea. Jan Turner, Tony Hunt, they were the two main organisers. Although they were the backup team, they still had numbers on. They still completed the whole race, so they featured in the finishes. The idea was they stayed behind, so if anybody got into trouble, they wouldn't be sort of left on their own up the mountain. There was going to be somebody behind to help them out and get them down. Fortunately, the ones that got injured, they were quite low down. It wasn't too much trouble getting them back down into Namche. We were told if we'd have fallen over up in the upper reaches where it was very snowy, we'd have had a very uncomfortable journey back down the mountain on the back of a yak, possibly with a broken leg. So we were warned, don't be crazy, do be careful, treat this course with respect. So how did we get back? We had a short trek back down to Lukla. I mentioned earlier that a lot of the trekking trips now, they fly you into Lukla and you trek in from there, but we just had a one-day trek back down to Lukla, and then we flew out on these little aeroplanes. This is quite a recent picture of Lukla Airport. When we was there in 87, there was no tarmac. The runway was just that sandy, dusty track, and the plane takes off over the edge of that cliff, heading towards these mountains. That was the scariest thing in the whole trip for me. If I could have had an option to walk back to Jerry and get a bus, I would have done it for sure. That was the scariest bit of the trip for me. I didn't like that at all. And so we got back to Kathmandu. We had a presentation party at the hotel, so it was well received, the race in Nepal. There was the tourist minister, the sports minister, Nepalese princess presenting prizes. We had a second night in Kathmandu where we had a few beers. We went downtown and painted the town red. These are amongst my most treasured possessions. My Everest Marathon plate and my Everest Marathon medal. They're in my cabinet at home. I got my lodger to take a picture so I could add them into this spread. I think if there was a message I would be giving from this talk is, if you've got a dream, you want to do something, and you believe you can do it, go for it. The worst you can do is fail. Failure is not as bad as not having a go. That would be my sort of ethos. Okay, so thank you for listening. And if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to try and take them.
Okay, question time. Anybody got some questions? All right, let me slowly get over there and I'll...
Wow, what an incredible feat that you've done for yourself all those years ago. So I actually worked with Olympic athletes, and so I'm curious to know the impact of the downhill running, because we used to do experiments where we would run people down a 10% gradient, and when I done it, I've never been as sore in my life. So I'm curious to know just the impact of the downhill running itself on your muscle.
Right. On this particular race, it perhaps wasn't as bad as when I did that Snowdon one, because here the terrain was awful. It was very rocky, so you couldn't do what you perhaps do in normal trail running, where you really open your legs and you're sprinting down, thumping down hard. You saw from the times we did, but they weren't very fast times. Probably an example of that is when I did the three-peak shot race, coming down Snowdon from the top to the bottom, it's about 5 miles, and it is actually a proper road, well, reasonable road, it's not rocky. And I came down there in about 25 minutes. Well, I've never run 5 miles on the flat in 25 minutes. But when I got to the flat section to get back to Carnarvon, my legs would hardly work at all. It was very hard. And I had permanent black toenails. During this year, every toenail was either non-existent, it had fallen off, or it was black from, the thumping into the shoe. So, and these muscles here, it did have an effect. And obviously before the race, although I wasn't really a fell runner, I did try and do a few fell races, in preparation for this race, but my training was regular marathon training.
Very interesting. Talking about tenacity, but yeah, mate. I was tired just listening to you. So how did you prepare yourself mentally at that level with less oxygen? Must have been quite a thing. That was quite a feat to do anyhow.
Yeah, I mean the lack of oxygen, that altitude, that is what they were most worried about, and why we did the very slow trekking from Jiri, and why they got so umpty with us when they found that we'd gone off and done a half marathon uphill partway through the race. But as regards to sort of the mental attitude, when I trained for a normal marathon, that's 26 miles, my Sunday training run would always be 30 miles. So when I lined up for a marathon, the distance just weren't a problem. I just got to go a bit faster. And I did it as 3 10-mile laps. So after each 10 mile, I'm coming back past home where there's that temptation to just jack it. And that was to build, the mental strength. But that would apply to sort of any sort of racing, not just this.
Remarkable feat, but was that just a one-off, or does the race continue today, and what's historically happening?
No, good question. I should have mentioned that. It's now every 2 years. The race is still going. I think in about 2013 it got taken over by a different set of organisers, and it's more, I would say, professional now. There's also a 10k and a half marathon. I think they've also incorporated an ultra version, which is more than a marathon. But yeah, it's still going.
Did they control the food and water to make sure no food illnesses occurred, or was it Nepali food, or would they import the food in, or how'd they handle the food issue?
I got to like curry, which I didn't much before. The Sherpas, that picture you saw the Sherpa in the big baskets, they carried our food in. The higher up the mountain we got, the less meat content there was. It was more, vegetarian food. But yeah, all the food was, in the main, carried up the mountain. And on the way up, because this is a regular trekking path, there are little villages where there would be shops, in inverted commas. Some of them sold beer, as we found out, speaking to the Sherpas. So they could buy some stuff on the way up, but in the main, it all had to be carried up, which was the role of the Sherpas, and on the upper reaches, the yaks that we used.
Well done on that. Anyway, it's fantastic what you did and the charitable side of it. I've personally watched a lot of videos about Everest on the BBC.
Yeah.
That's as far as I get to mountain climbing, watching the video. But what alarmed me, and I don't know what you think about it, it was showing the video of people climbing Everest, and there's a long queue just waiting to get to the summit. Almost like a few years they'll be building a cable car to go to the top of Everest. I think it's over-commercialisation. I think there's a danger of that. I don't know what you think. It's a beautiful mountain, obviously, and it's a target for many people. But this what I saw in the video, is a huge queue. Getting near the top of going past frozen bodies, etc., is getting too commercialised, albeit for charity. The Sherpas deserve all they can get. But do you think, like I think, is getting a bit too commercialised?
Yeah, I would agree it is, and I think there is a concern amongst climbing communities and they are trying to limit the number of people that can go there, because the problem there is, I don't think the problem's the right word, it's not a technically difficult mountain to climb. We didn't go any higher than base camp. To get to the top, if you're fit and you've got enough money to get yourself on an expedition, you can get yourself a shot at getting to the top of Everest. I mean, Hillary got up there, in 53, the first ascent. It's been summited 8,000 times since then, but only 200 or 300 times without oxygen. Most of those trips go up using oxygen. But yeah, you're quite right. There's a queue waiting to go up, and it is an issue.
It's incredible. It's a long way from the days of Mallory who may have been the first, then Hillary and Tenson. But because of the equipment now, it's not to say easier, but obviously easier than it was then to climb Everest. There are many beautiful mountains, and it's just because it's the biggest one. I just felt it's getting a little bit over-commercialised. That's a danger, albeit helping maybe the Sherpas and their people, but you get too much commercialism, it destroys the beauty of the place. That's all I'm saying.
You're quite right. I mean, from what I've heard, Base Camp, they are trying to tidy it up now, but it was getting to be like a bit of a rubbish tip. And I do believe the race organisers now that do the race, they do insist on not leaving anything on the mountain. All their rubbish has to come down with them, but it is an issue. You're quite right.
Okay, well done anyway, what you did.
This is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but were you drug tested?
No, I wasn't. Good question though. I mean,
because I'd have had to have drugs to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of international events, you do get drugs tested. I mean, I haven't been personally drugs tested. I've never been done a race where I've needed to be because I've not won any medals. But no, we weren't. We were probably, we were just driven. I mean, people have said to me, "Why did you do it?" And when Mallory was asked about Everest, why he did it, he said because it's there. And I think it's similar for me. I saw that article in the magazine. I'd just done that 3 Peaks yacht race, and I just got sucked in. I thought, wow. And once I got sucked in, there was going to be no turning back. Didn't matter who said, no, you can't do this, it's crazy. Everyone else was up for it, so we were going to go and do it.
Here's the thing that amazes me after listening to Terry running the marathon at Mount Everest. I know there's Thai ladies that have to get a motorbike when they're going from Soi 6 to Soi 6-1. And here he's running a marathon at, hats off to you. As a token of our appreciation, Terry, we have a certificate for you.